Alrighty, welcome to another Python differ study group. Today there's no class from the book again. We're just kind of answering questions and going over the functions homework. And after whatever questions the class has, if we don't cover the whole 30 minutes, then I have some cool things to show you about the homework, how to make it better. So I'm going to open the floor to the questions. Any questions so far about anything in class from the beginning all the way to today? Feel free. Okay, well, you're all thinking. I haven't opened the chat yet, so I can see if anybody has any questions.
No one yet.
You have nothing? You have something, Brooke?
I'm gonna give my voice a little bit of a break today.
Okay, oh, that's fine. That's fine. All right. So from last class, actually I should, instead of showing you this first, so we can kind of recap. Let me show you what my answer was to the homework, right? I imported the function, I have my path defined, where's my stuff is, where my output is gonna be at or be placed. I call my functions and I call another function to print, and same for the other types or not type, the other the database. Same thing. Where is it? Where I'm gonna put the report out, parse it, and then print it, right? And then you have the functions, which are the ones that actually do the magic, right? So when you call this function, it parses the JSON. When you call this function, it parses the database. And when you call this function, it prints to the file. Perfect. Now, what I wanted to discuss today, absent any questions, is a way of making your script more general use, okay? And before we do that, I'm gonna type here a couple of definitions that I think we need. All right, so, and that's a little bit small. Let me see if I can make this larger. All right, so what's a file, right? And for the purpose of the discussion today, a file is gonna be any file, and it's kind of interpreting as Python, right? So let's just name it, let's just call this text for now, if I could find it. Plain text, there we go. All right, any file that contains code, all right? That's just a file. That's why we're gonna treat it as a file. So what's a script then? What's the difference? A script is a file, or any file, you execute from terminal or the command line, okay? To do a task, from terminal to do a task, okay? And then what's a module? A module, it's a file, since I'm not doing proper grammar, then let's keep it that way. File you intend, or proper intent to import, okay? All right, so these two definitions, I'm gonna use them to the discussion today. Are you files, file contain code, a script you're gonna execute, and a module, file you intend to import. And they'll be important in a second when we talk about script and module, because I'm gonna show you what the main function, what that is, right? Okay, so keep these definitions in mind, okay? Second thing I wanna talk about today, apart from the definitions, is how to make the code more general use, okay? So let me reduce this again. So in this script, my initial solution is really limited, right? I had to type in this path in the code itself, in the module itself, right? And again, this is the module because I intend to import it, right? So I have to type the path inside the module and the output path inside the module. Okay, you see this? Right, so if I wanna deal with a database in another location, I have to go into my module and change that path, right? Which again, it might take a few seconds, but if you have to do this constantly, it's really annoying. So to make it more general use, right? I have to find a way to tell my script, not the module, the script, the code that I intend to run, tell it where is the input folder and where is the output folder. So that way I don't have to change my module constantly and be deleting this and typing it in, deleting it and typing it in, okay? Right? The way we usually do that is through arguments to our script, okay? If you're not familiar with arguments to a script, I'm gonna show you that right now. I'm gonna open my terminal here. Okay, again, this is kind of small. Let's make it larger. Okay, let's clear this. All right, so where are we at? Yeah, we're in the right directory. So I'm gonna take my kick my kick Discord parser script, right? And I'm gonna execute it as is, as you've been doing since the beginning of class. You call your interpreter and you call the script and you execute. And look what happens. When I do that, it tells me, look, if you're gonna use this script, right? You have some options here. You can use the H, right? Which is for help, right? The I will determine the input path and the O will determine the output path, right? It tells me the error, right? The following arguments are required. You need the I for the input or O for the output path. And notice here that you can use either -O to determine the output path or minus output path to determine also the output path. So if you're not satisfied with this, you're like, well, I need more information about this. Well, then do the following. Call the script and use the -H argument. And it gives you more information, a little bit kind of nice. It tells you, oh, look, this is a kick and Discord chat parser in case the name was not clear enough, right? Obvious enough. And it tells you, look, you have these optional arguments. You have the help, shows this help. It's kind of self-explanatory, obviously. And then again, input path and path to input folder. Does that make sense? So, and I know, I mean, we're all familiar with this type of way, right? This is kind of like the convention we use. So we don't have to, so we can provide that information to your script, okay? So if we're going to execute it based on these instructions, the way you would do it is, okay, I got my parser. It says here to use input. So I'm gonna use the I for my input. Right, where's my input? Where's that directory? Since I'm not lazy, I'm efficient. I'm gonna just drag the folder in here and it will put the path there. Excellent. And then I'm gonna go here because I don't want to type all that stuff. And then -O, right? Where's the output path? So I'm gonna go and just drag it in here and it writes it for me, right? So now I'm providing my script with two arguments. The first one is the input, the I, right? With a value in it, and the O with that value. So the script knows where to get the stuff and knows where to output the stuff or return that stuff out for you. And if you hit enter, there you go. So the way I did the script, right? It runs, it's showing the stuff to the screen because I told it to. You don't have to, you can just run it and have it tell you, I'm done, right? So it goes and does its thing. And then when you go to the output folder, there's your stuff, right? There's your data. And it looks kind of funky because of the editor, but it's tab separated values. So if you open it in Excel, it looks fantastic, right? Does the way arguments work make sense? If it makes sense, give me a 1. Okay. And again, you might be like, I know this already, but I want to explain it real clear because now I'm going to show you how to do that with your script. How can we have your scripts receive arguments? Okay. All right. So before I teach you that, I'm going to teach you how much time I have. Okay. Well, not money, time, although we all want money. All right. So let me teach you a couple of things, right? So this is the magic for that part, and I'll teach it in a second. Before we get in, I want to show you one more thing. Here I'm defining my script starts by defining main, right? What does that mean? As you might remember me saying constantly, Python parses or not parses, executes top, down, left to right. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can tell Python to go and start its execution at a specific place, okay? At a specific location or of your script. That location is called main. You can call it main. Okay. What does that mean? This is gonna be a little bit of the innards of how Python works. Okay. Remember, if Python goes and executes from top, down, left to right, it does the import, right? It does the import OS, and whatever's in argparse, in those modules, it will also execute as needed, right? When it goes to my parser functions, it will go here and execute as needed. And why do I say as needed? Because the moment Python comes to def, where it's defining a function, it doesn't parse the function at the moment it's going through it, okay? It will not, it will continue. I mean, it'll keep it in memory, it'll take that function and put it in memory, but it's not gonna execute it, okay? And then I'll go to what's next. In this case, interestingly enough, the first thing it's gonna execute is that if.
Sorry, so it sort of skips over, is that what it does?
It loads the function in memory.
Okay.
Like, for example, all that's inside of here, like, maybe not the top, I haven't explained it, but this ifs and all that, it doesn't go through them. This for, it doesn't get executed. When you import a module or when you start running the script, if it's inside a function. Does that make sense?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm saying that because that's where main comes in, right? You can have a script full of different functions, different things, and you want to start at a specific place. Then when you do is you're going to define your main, and you're going to go here and check, okay, if name, I'll explain this variable in a second. If name equals main, then go to this function and start going out. Execute. And you notice I'm not calling any other functions down here. All the stuff is called within main. And that's a good programming convention where you have your main function and you call other functions from it. You don't have to do it that way. It's just a nice way of architecturing your scripts. And I'll give you a couple examples of why is that. Now, keep in mind when the interpreter goes to def, it says as a function, loads the function, and it will check for errors like syntax error, right? If you're missing something like this colon here, whatever, it will let you know there's a problem, right? So it will go through that part, but it will not execute the function yet, okay? As opposed to having if and else's out here, as you're executing, it will execute them straight up, right? If they're coming top down, left, right, okay? Now, what's that down here? Oh, one last thing. And I'm showing you this because you will see a lot, like 99% of code in the world is like this, in Python at least, where a main is defined and it checks and it goes. What is this check doing here? You see this variable here is called a double underscore variable. These variables are special, they're with Python, and they have specific functions, right? This variable called name specifically, or dunder for double unders, this dunder, the value of name changes depending on what's happening with your script. It doesn't depend on you. It depends on what's happening with your script. Well, I guess it does depend on you, but not directly. And let me explain. If I am running this script from the command line, the name, the internal dunder name that you see here will be main. It will be called main. If I take this script and it's a module and I import that module, right? And I do this if, and I print out what name is, it won't be main, it will be the name of the script, right? I'll repeat that again. If a script is executing itself, like on the command line, it's being executed, the dunder name of that script is called main, because that's the script you're starting working with. If that same script, you use it, then you turn it into a module, and that module is imported somewhere else, then name, if you look for the value in name within that module, it won't be main anymore. It will be the name of the module itself, okay? For example, if I were to look for main up here in my parser function, name, the double under for main, name will be parser functions without the extension. Now, you're like, who cares? Okay, for now, we'll come to that later in different classes. For now, what you need to understand is this. I want name to be main. And as long as I'm just executing my script as is, name will always be main, okay?
I think you might have lost me at least. I'm sorry.
No. And these are advanced concepts. You don't have to be sorry, right? That's why I'm kind of introducing them with the script that we're doing. Mm-hmm. And if it takes next class, then we'll do a next class too. There's no issue with that.
And main means, okay. I'll let you explain.
Yeah. So no, I'll take it again. Main is a word or a convention we use, and in a lot of. Let me give you this background. If you're using other programming languages and you want to start coding, unless you define a main function, you can't do anything. You can have all the code in the world, and if you don't tell that programming language, hey, here's my main, so you can start executing, it will not execute. Does that make sense so far? In Python, we don't need that. In Python, the convention is, or not the convention, the way it's set up is top, down, left, right, right? So I might run this code without main, and it's still gonna work. Don't get me wrong. The cool thing about defining a main is that you can put all your code within functions, right? And later on, as we continue to the book, when we start getting into object-oriented, that's a good thing. You want to have all your code within functions so you can kind of control it better, okay? The second thing is that when you define your main, then you can call out to other functions like I do here within main, right? And call in and bring in those things into main. I can change my execution order anywhere I want, because I'm just gonna start like here. I say, okay, if this condition is true, my first function to be executed is main. I can have 20 other functions on top or on bottom anywhere, but this is the one that I wanna execute and go from there, right? Heck, you might even write some other stuff here, I don't know. But those are good conventions that at this point, it might not make sense yet, but they will, right? So think of main, this function, as the starting point of your script, okay? We want to tell Python, hey, when we start, I want you to start with main. Another reason that I explained a second ago, and hopefully I can make it better now. When you put your code in functions, the Python will not execute it if there's a function, unless you call the function, okay?
Python will not execute it, you said?
Won't. Like if I start the script, this if is not executed, this if is not executed, this for is not executed until I do this part first, which is calling the function. Does that make sense?
It makes a bit more sense, but I think I'm gonna need to see. I think.
Oh, yeah. Imagine if I do this, right? I'm gonna comment this out. Okay. I'm gonna comment it out. Perfect. And then so we can the best way of learning is two examples. The output, I'm gonna delete it. There's no output there. So move to trash. Okay, let's keep it here. And let's execute this code and see what happens. Where's my run? You see, I mean, there's no output here, right? I mean, it run succeeded on the bottom. There's here, and is there anything here? Any output? No. In case you're doubting, you see here my arguments. So I gave my script the arguments that I needed, so they're here. It knows where to get the data, and when it starts, it doesn't do anything. Why? Because this code is not executed. The main code, and I will answer questions in a second. This main code is not executed because I never called it. See, I deleted that call. So none of this happens. Does that make sense, Brooke?
Yeah, it makes more sense.
All right, I saw a raised hand. I don't know how that works. Maybe somebody wants to talk? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's me. Just wanted to summarize what you're trying to say, just to make sure that I understood.
Mm-hmm.
So you're trying to say that if we define a main, that main, once you've defined it, it does not get, when you're executing the code, that the codes under main doesn't get executed. Rather, it gets compiled and stored in memory for it to start. Well, unless you call the code, like with the if statement, it won't execute this the bunch of code inside main.
Yes and no. So what I said about main is actually true of any functions, right? Function we place in memory until you call them, and main is another one. The reason I mentioned main, because the function called the convention name is one that's used across all programming languages to indicate which function is going to be the starting point of your script. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yes. So in effect, it doesn't matter what the name of the function is. The function will not get executed unless you get it, unless you call it.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
Just
No, and that's helpful, because that's actually one of the teaching points I'm really adamant of making today, because I felt in past classes I didn't. So I want to make that point clear. So I'm glad it's coming through. That's perfect. Thank you for that question. Yeah. So that's why I'm making that point. And, ignoring this conditional, right? I could just straight up call main straight up and not even look at the conditional. Obviously, it wouldn't be indented, right? It would be like this. Oops. And it will also work, right? Because I'm just calling the function. The reason and actually this is something I would like you all to do more research on, because it's also I want you to not depend on me to digest everything for you, right? I'm going to give you some things you need to research on. This variable name is, again, it's a variable that's saying, well, before I get into that, I guess we understood what the function is, right?
Right. I'm sorry to stop you. You were speaking just a little bit fast there for me.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. I speak fast too. What did you say about name?
Yeah, before I go into name, I just want to recap one last thing. And again, remember this. You can have 20 functions name 20 different things. You don't need a main if you don't want to. Having a main is good practice for the reasons I explained previously. That's it. Now, in order to I'll go into the name part. One way of telling your script, hey, we're ready to go, execute my main, one way of doing it is by checking internally if your script is your main script. And how do you check that? By using this variable. This variable, you don't define it. This variable, and you notice here, notice how I'm doing, I'm doing a checking, right? Is this equal to this? Did I put any values inside name myself in this code? No, I did not, right? If I do Control F and put name, there's only one, it's kind of small, but it's only one name in this whole script, right? I did not have to initialize this. And when I say initialize, remember, if I try to see what's inside a variable that I hadn't put anything inside of it yet, it will give me an error. All right, does that make sense? I'm gonna ping on you, Brooke, because you know you're the co-host here. Does that make sense? If you try to check, is the variable name, as an example here, right? Heck, if I do a print my name, the variable Alex, right? And I haven't put anything inside of Alex, it will give me an error, right? You gotta first, you know, inside Alex, put something in it.
Yeah.
And then you can print it, right?
Okay.
Well, with this double under here, name, I didn't do this part here. I never put anything inside of it because it's something internal to Python. Python uses this variable called a dunder or double underscore name to keep track internally if the script name is main because you're executing it from the command line at that point, or if you're importing it as a module, then name will be equal to the name of the module. In this case, if it's parser functions, it will be called parser functions. If it's called kick disk or parser, then that's what name will have in it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right, and that's helpful for you to sometimes locate, okay, as code gets more complex and you're bringing modules in from different places and you wanna make sure where you're at or which module is executing at a particular point in time, then you can just call it name. Question, go ahead.
Yeah, just the value for double underscore name. If you're using a different function, will the value be double underscore, you know, parser function double underscore, or will it be just equal to parser function only?
So the variable name doesn't change. The contents will, right?
Yeah,
So,
I meant the contents. The contents over here, it's double underscore main, right? So
yes.
is it going to be the same thing for the other functions as well? Is it going to be double underscore parser functions, or is it going to be different?
Great. No, that's a great question. No double underscore there. Just parser function. Just the name. That's
okay.
That's
so in effect, does Python recognize main as a special function or something? That is it you know, like reserved?
Internally, that name resolution there is when you the code is executing when you start, right? When the first script that you execute from the command line will be your main. Internally, this will always be this, right?
Okay.
If I take this as if you can do it, you can take this script here and make it a module and import it somewhere else. Then at that point, main won't be kick disk or parser. The main will be the one that's calling it. Does that make sense?
All right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Now, why am I doing this here? Right, and I wasn't going to talk about that today, but I'm going quickly so it makes sense to you. Why do I care about this? So if you notice here about my script, I call my main, I put all my code in it, I make sure that the name of that code is my main, and I call my function. So my function executes, it takes the arguments, which I'll explain in a second, and then it does some comparisons here. For example, here, it checks if the output path was provided, right? And if it's not provided, right, it's the path of that output path is 0 because I didn't put it in. And assuming, there was a problem there, right? Like the directory doesn't exist. It will print an error and it will return. When it returns, when you return a function, what happens to the function? Will it execute the rest? If you think it will execute the rest, give me a 1. If you think it will not execute the rest, give me a 0. Exactly. Yeah, I see a couple of zeros. Exactly, right? So notice how I'm using the fact that I have this, that I'm putting everything in a function to kind of shorthand a little bit. When do I stop my function, right? Or how do I, and look, I'm returning nothing because there's nothing to return, right? How do I deal with some errors here, right? If I didn't have this in a function and I want to stop execution here, I will have to do different things to stop execution. I would have to maybe put all this code down here inside, you know, a function itself and then stop that function, right? And again, this might not make super sense, but just keep that in mind. I want to stop execution of this function, just return and return nothing. And the execution of that function is stopped, okay? So that's one reason I like using, for this particular example, a main, or have my code inside a function. So then when I need to leave the function, I could easily just, okay, return, done, and I'm out, okay? It reduces my code, the code I have to do. Brooke, did that make sense to you?
That makes a bit more sense to me, yeah.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to teach is, look, you got your script, you're gonna receive arguments, which I'll explain now. And you can also take all your script and put it inside a function. If it's your starting point, you can call it main, which will help. It's a convention that's used all around. There'll be other benefits that we'll discuss in the future. And one benefit, at least for this one, is, look, if I'm done with my function because I found something, an error or something that was wrong, I just hit return and I'm out. And I'm done with that script. You better run it again. So that's kind of like the main teaching points. Be aware, right? There's many ways of doing this. And somebody that's way more Python knowledgeable than me, which could be anybody, could tell me, Alex, that's not efficient. That's not good. Okay. The point is, I'm trying to teach you concepts, right? And what I'm trying to teach you is your functions, your mains, when you return that it stops execution, your namespace, how if you use the dunder name, when it will be called main, and when it will have the name of the script. That's the main points I want to teach to you today. Okay. Are there better ways of doing this? Yes, there might be. You know, all depends on your use case. Okay. Now, for the last part that I'm going to discuss today, because we run out of time, the arguments itself. Homework number 1, look for double underscore name and read about it so you get more understanding. And homework number 2, look the documentation in Python for argparse or argument parse. Okay, do that. Really important.
When you say look at the documentation, do you just mean online? Like,
yeah, online. Yes, online.
Right.
Yeah, online. Because online will have a lot of examples and stuff that will complement what I'm about to explain now. All right. When I import argparse, what that does is, right, I can now call it. So I call argparse and I use, you know, the dot notation method and this stuff that we already know how to do, right? Instead of it, there's a function called argument parser, right? And we're gonna give it a description, kick and Discord chat parser. And that, you know, executes that class. And now parser, this variable that I have here is an object of that class, okay? Now, what does that mean? That means that now I can say, okay, so this parser variable that's, you know, pretty much is the execution of my module, I want to add an argument. I want to add the input, and I want to add another argument, output. You can add as many arguments that you need. There's many different type of arguments, right? And that's part of the homework that you need to do. And as you're going through your homework, reading about argparse, it will come to mind all the script that you run and all the different type of arguments that you'll come across, okay? When you define an argument, the documentation will tell you what it needs to have, right? It will have what the argument name is, the short version and the long version. You can tell if it's required, true. That means that the script will not continue if this argument is not provided, okay? What do you do with that data that you're collecting? I want to store it in a variable, so put store, right? And what happens if you ask for help, right? For this argument, it will be path to input folder, and you can put in there whatever you want. And if you remember from a second ago, when I wrote help, it gave me this information that you see here, okay? Same thing with the second argument, the short version of that argument, or how you're gonna call it. The long version, is it required? Yes. Action, you're gonna store it, and the help message if you ask for help. Required could be false, right? There are scripts that might require an argument or might not, right? It might be an optional thing, right? You might have a script that says, okay, if I have a path, I want to go through that path. But if I don't have a path, I just want to go through the directory I'm sitting in right now. That's one example of when an argument might not be required. Because you might want your script to parse something in a location, or you might want the script to parse something right there and there, right? you can code to that using your arguments. Okay, so what does the argparse do for you? So, all right, so now you're gonna parse those arguments and you're gonna put them in a variable called arguments. And what that does is it takes the names you provided here. Let me see here, where is it? Input path, right? I call it input path. And I'm gonna, because this here, it's I think it's a list. See, I'm not, let me just, before I'll tell you a lie, let me just confirm. Okay, we'll execute this and look at it to make sure it's a list. I'm gonna say it's a list, but I'm not sure. But I think it's a list. So of your arguments that you provided here, right? It will put them in a list, and then you can pull them out. Okay, you can pull out your output path, and you can pull out your input path as you name them, you know, up here. Okay. If you have more arguments, this list will have more arguments. So let me execute this to make sure that I'm not lying to you. If it's a list. Well, it's a class namespace. All right, so I lied. It's not a list. But the point is that you can then just, and it makes sense because it's dot, right? It's not, I'm a dummy. If it were a list, we would have to pull it out this way, right? So yeah, so it's a class that we're gonna also pull out using the dot notation. So that's no problem. So let me recap this part, because this part, I said many things way fast. And remember, you need to look into this, do your research, right? Take into account, before I explain, this is another one of those code patterns that I've been teaching you, right? If you copy paste this into your code and change it accordingly, it will work as you're learning how to use it, okay? So you're gonna have a variable that you will call your module and provide a description. Then you're gonna, to that variable there, you're gonna add an argument and put the information that arguments require. You're gonna add another argument and put the information for that argument, and you can add as many as you want. Those will be contained within our parse.parseargs, right? Parser, because that's the name we define for a variable. We're gonna pull them out as args. You can name it whatever you want here. And then use what you wrote here at input path, output path, and pull out those values, okay? Let me show you so it makes more sense. If I go here and I hit print input path, and if I print here output path, right? What's gonna happen? There we go. You see this? My input path and my output path. That's one thing I like doing, and I recommend as you're learning Python or anything that you're learning. Use print a lot to understand what's happening, and use type a lot to understand what's happening, okay? And notice me, I mean, again, I'm no Python master, right? But I made the assumption that if I'm receiving things, must be a list. But no, look, what is dot notation here? And the type reinforced my learning. Oh, of course, duh, it's not a list, because lists will learn that they're accessed by their index location. And we're not doing this here. We're using our dot notation that we learned before. So it's not a list, okay? And notice the process, the learning process, how you, by using your prints, your types, you can reinforce what you're learning. So, you know, you grow as a coder that way, okay? By adding these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines of code here, I was able to get from the user the input path, where the stuff is, and the output path, where my stuff is gonna be placed when my processing is done, okay? If that makes sense, give me a 1. Okay, all right. I know this is a lot. Do you think we need a break, Brooke?
I think so.
Yeah, it is a lot. It is a lot. I could talk more, but no. I think we're gonna stop here today, because it's a lot of this is really more advanced concepts. But I think they're great. I'm gonna recap homework. Look at argparse documentation and play with it. Do a little script that you're gonna provide inputs to, right? Like arguments to, and print out those on the screen, okay? And make sure you're able to do that, okay?
So say that one more time. So look at the documentation for argparse and print them out. Say that one more time.
Do a little script that will have your a script that will have arguments that will receive like this, 2 arguments, and then those 2 arguments, after they're received, they're gonna be printed to the screen. And again, you can use the same code I have here, because I just want you to make sure that you put it in and that you actually type it in, or even if you copy paste it. I'm gonna put it on the Discord, but even if you copy paste it, I want you to execute it yourself, so it actually makes sense. And add these things, add a description, add proper variable names, whatever you want to do, okay? And just print them out. So that way you have a feel of how arguments are received and how are they come in. Hey, Brooke, I like your 0.5. It's better than than -2, which is usually how I operate. Okay, so that's one. The second is, for your self-edification, look at the dunder or double underscore name variable, or even just look into dunders themselves and just read. I won't have an exercise for that. I just want you to get more knowledgeable a little bit about that. I will add to this knowledge in future classes, okay? I'm just kind of setting that foundation, okay? All right, and that's pretty much it. Go ahead.
Somebody asked, is the best place to read on python.org?
For the documentation, yes. Make sure that you're reading your documentation for Python 3, because if you're not careful, you might be reading Python 2, and it might do the same thing, but there might be some differences that might confuse you. So you can do python.org, that's fine, or anywhere else for that matter, as long as you make sure you're on Python 3. That what you're reading, it applies to Python 3, okay? And it will tell you on the top, like, argparse, Python 3, and whatever it is, Actually, let me give you an example. I think I have it on screen here. Hold on. Yeah, I have one here of argparse I was going to review in before class. See, new in version 3.2, right? And then, parser for command line options, right? Arguments and subcommands. And it gives you an example, and it goes through this whole thing. This is your homework, right? Go through it, and you might not read the whole thing, but read enough to understand, like, description. Look, there's one called epilogue. What is that? I don't know. Parents. I mean, there's all different things you can use. When it gets into down here, you might not need it, but at least know enough to be able to understand what's happening here. What's happening when we receive the argument, and how you store it inside your script, and how can you input it out to your screen, okay?
And a question I have, this is a logistical question. So Thursday, it's only the 2nd, but I don't know if people are going to be, I don't know where people can go to these days, but if people are going away for the long weekend, do we still want to meet on Thursday, or should we, I mean, I'm not going anywhere personally, but should we still meet on Thursday? Or
if it's not too hot, I'm going to my porch. How about that?
Okay. Sounds good.
No. I mean, we let's put it on Discord, and then
Okay.
Or maybe we want the break. I don't know. Let's put it on Discord. But if I'm not close to having a day off, that'll be fine with me.
I'm fine with whatever. I just didn't know what people are doing in different parts of, for the people who are in the U.S., the different parts of the country.
Gotcha. All right, let's put it on Discord, and if we got a few people, then we can just not do it for that day.
Can post. Okay. So TBD. I'm good with Thursday. Okay, we have one who's good with. Okay, excellent. Yay.
Okay, then we'll get a few more. If you get a few more yays from now, okay. And
oh, another one. Yay. Okay.
Yeah, then and it'll be 30 minutes. What we have for next week is I'm gonna finish discussing error handling, which is what's happening here, and then I'm gonna show you. Actually, and then I'm gonna show you this cool thing called OS list dir, which is fantastic. I'm gonna show you that. So it's gonna be pretty exciting. Again, the purpose is to make the script more general use, right? So it could apply to more circumstances, not just this particular file, you know, and this particular only database, right? We're gonna make it more general use. So that's what we're doing next week. And then on Thursday, we finish the script, then I'll give book pages, which I haven't already lined up, but I'm not gonna give them yet. So we'll discuss them on Thursday, if we do class on Thursday.
That'll be good. Cool.
All right, any other comments from the group? Brooks,
Nope.
the master here, thoughts?
No, I think we're good. I'm good.
All right, everybody, so I'm gonna stop the recording. Thank you for being here.
Tell us what you really think, guys.